This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed. Hey everyone, it's Benefits Buzz time. I'm your host, Eric Piela. I'm joined with my co-host, Hayden Goethe. Hayden, we've got kind of a fun, funky encore style episode this week, don't we?
We do, yeah. I mean, it's a topic that is certainly proven to be top of mind for a lot of our listeners, and the stats should certainly bear that out. So it's kind of fun to be able to build on that, really in real time. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when we recorded the last episode about LSAs.
Yeah, exactly. So that the Build Your LSA Your Way has been one of our most watched and listened to episodes, and so based on that, we actually did a lifestyle spending account webinar where we kind of we brought on Eric, who happened to be a guest on that original podcast, and Jonas Sove as well as a guest, and we actually kind of did more of a workshop style where if you are an HR employer and you are looking to potentially, implement an LSA or want to know more about how to go about doing that, we actually did a really cool workshop where we talked through goals, we talked through things to think through, talk about planning, what a design would look like, what are some pitfalls. We kind of do that 201 level, like almost a kind of peel the onion and went a bit deeper into what that would be. It was a really cool webinar. And we thought,
if you're in the place where you're like, all right, lifestyle spending account is what we need, like we're going to kind of help you set that up.
Yeah, and it was we thought, what the heck, why keep it just to a webinar? Let's share it with the podcast, because I think, again, based on our interest, we thought it's a good opportunity to do so. So this is our quick little intro as we kind of segue our way to the episode. You recognize my voice as well. I always got to be the host of the webinar. And so we hope you enjoy this episode of Benefits Buzz. For those of you who are really curious and interested on an LSA and what it would take to create and design a plan for it. So enjoy this episode.
So as we get started here again, hello and welcome to today's session, LSAs, a deeper dive into this trending benefit. In just a moment here, I'll hand over the webinar to our team of experts who you can see are joining us today, and they will be discussing the details of LSAs. So let me introduce them to you up front here. Joining us today to teach us more about lifestyle spending accounts are Eric Piela, our moderator for today's conversation, as well as our experts, Jonas Sove and Erica Pollock. We're so glad you could join us as we discuss the basics of lifestyle spending accounts, or LSAs, as well as why and how these plans are becoming increasingly useful tools in company benefit offerings, both for employers like you, as well as your employees.
And welcome everyone to our webinar. We're so excited that you could join us. We've got a great lineup of wonderful presenters and trainers on the LSA topic. We did a webinar, employee wellness webinar a couple of weeks ago. And part of that webinar, we asked and introduced the concept around LSAs. And it was one of the most intriguing items that we covered. We had tons of questions on it. And so we decided, let's develop a webinar about LSA. So this is by demand. We've created this great webinar today. And we wanted to go beyond just the 101. What is an LSA? We wanted to treat this webinar as really an LSA workshop. So it's an opportunity for you to really explore what would an LSA look like at your organization. So we'll cover what's trending. We'll talk about, tips to start building your LSA if you wanted to do so. What are some common plan designs, do's and don'ts? And of course, benchmarking. What are employers like yourself doing? What's working? What's not working? So you can get some tangible examples about how LSAs are actually working out in the wild. It's going to be fantastic. We actually do have a guide. We have a Build Your LSA guide that Natalie just put in the chat. And we love for you to go to that link, and you can actually download that guide right now. And actually, we'll kind of use that. This is kind of an interactive workshop. So you can actually look at that guide. We'll be walking through very similarly to how it's laid out in that guide to kind of really think about your goals and everything that in your decision process around an LSA. So please do that now. Take a moment and follow along. So with that said, let's kind of jump into a poll. We want this to be interactive. And not only was there tons of inquiries about LSAs, but we have a question for you. What percentage of growth do you think WEX is seeing in employers' offerings and LSAs? There are 4 options you can see. 40% growth, 81% growth, 305% growth, or 77% growth. I see lots of answers flying in right now. This is always fun. It's kind of like watching a horse race to see which is going to win here. This is great. So obviously, there is a lot of growth. Just how much we're about to reveal here. I still see answers pouring in. It's really close now. It's between 40% and 77%, it's coming down to 2. It looks like we're good. Natalie, if you're able to show that, we'll kind of lock that in. It looks like the winner was 40%, but for those of you who actually guessed 77%, that is the actual increase that we are seeing in clients offering LSAs. So it is absolutely on the rise, and there's lots of reasons for this. Jonas, you are our expert. Jonas and Erica, who have joined us, are experts on LSAs. And so maybe let's just start by, what does this number mean to you, and what else are you seeing when it comes to LSAs, and why are they on the rise?
Yeah, sounds good. So that 77% really stuck out to us as, these things are being adopted. We'll talk a little bit more about the basics in a second, but not only are employers offering them, more of them are offering them at a pretty substantial rate. And then we also take a look at annual information around how much our consumers are spending, how our enrollment's performing. And when we pair that 77% growth rate with the fact that we've seen a 215% increase in spend, we're summarizing that there's more employers offering them, there's more funds that are being provided, and we're also seeing a nice uptick in enrollments as well. So not only more employers, but larger employers as well. So the trajectory we're on is really strong. We're really excited to continue to watch this product evolve over time.
That's great. Thanks, Jonas. I appreciate that. And obviously, we wanted to show you and get everyone excited about LSAs and that there is tons of growth there. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think we really should do our due diligence, and we should just say, hey, for those of you who maybe don't know, let's just set a baseline, right? If you could quickly just talk us about what is an LSA, and from your perspective, why do you think they're so valuable? Why are we seeing the growth?
Yeah, sounds good. So first off, what is an LSA? It is a post-tax spending account that is completely employer funded and really customized to meet not only your needs, but the needs of your employees. And when these first started to come up, the real thesis or concept around them was really focused on how, as an employer, do I provide dollars to my employees that anybody can take advantage of, regardless of where they are in their life. So are they a young employee in college or fresh out of college? Are they maybe more middle-aged, having kids and buying a house? Are they a little bit older and on the verge of retirement? The lifestyle of those people typically varies greatly, right? And the expenses that they're interested in spending money on varies as well. So the whole goal of it, and hopefully you'll see that reflected throughout the whole conversation today, is to build a benefit that anybody can find value in and have dollars to really, apply to their different lifestyle. Oftentimes you'll hear us or others talk about physical, financial, emotional wellness as kind of 3 key and common buckets. I like to bucket the emotional with other as well, because other things come up, and it's a flexible, customizable benefit that can be used to meet your needs. And so it goes above and beyond just those 3, especially if you have a certain need there. But maybe stepping back, the real focus of the eligible expenses and the experience is to add value to you as well as the employer, right? So creating healthier habits with your employees, creating happier employees, and increasing their well-being. So that's kind of the foundation around the downstream effect that you can see with your employees. And Eric will talk in a bit about some other benefits there. But ultimately, to summarize it, it's a benefit that gives you the ability to control it. And also talk a little bit about why are they trending now? Now, they did start to come up before COVID, but we really saw the adoption of them increase through COVID because the world has changed so much over time. Pre-COVID, we were at historically low unemployment levels, so employers were trying to get creative with how to recruit and retain employees. But fast forward to now, we're back to that historically low unemployment level. Obviously, a lot of uncertainty in the world today with inflation and all of that. But focusing on employee wellness is even more important now because of all the things that we've all faced over the last 2 to 3 years now, as weird as that is to say. And also working from home comes with its own challenges. So personally, I get wrapped up at work. I sit at my desk all day. I forget to go and take breaks and take care of myself. And a lifestyle benefit allows employers a way to help incentivize people to be mindful about their wellness and actually financially incent them to take steps in the appropriate direction.
That's great. Thanks, Jonas. Good overview. There was something that stood out to me. You said the words post-tax benefit, right? And so, there are a lot of common questions that we get when employers are looking at LSAs. And one of them always is, why would I offer a post-tax benefit other than another pre-tax option, right? Or heck, just giving employees bonuses or more money. So what's the value there, Erica?
Yeah, the value really comes in is that it gives the employer really a lot of creative freedom. LSAs have fewer regulations than what we're used to with traditional benefit offerings. And so it gives the employer true control over what they would like to offer to their employees. They're entirely flexible and they can design something that really fits the need of their individuals, whether that's for the full population, perhaps it's for specific demographics or classes of employee within their workforce. And they can really tailor it to meet that need based on, any internal efforts that they have or initiatives that they want to draw attention to, if they want to really drive behaviors in a certain way. And so offering this as a post-tax instead of a traditional pre-tax benefit, or even just increasing, a bonus offering or things like that, really drives more engagement and really fits the end goal that employer is trying to achieve.
That's great. Thanks, Erica. Because this is a deep dive, we wanted to keep some of the 101 level LSA stuff separate. But however, if you are just getting introduced to LSAs and you want to get a little bit more information, even after our webinar today, WEX actually has a Benefits Buzz podcast. It's a fantastic podcast. I'm one of the hosts, so that was a little self-serving. But we do have a great session that we just did a couple episodes ago on LSAs. Now he's going to throw the link to that podcast right in the chat for you. So if you have a spare 15, 20 minutes and want to learn more about the 101s of LSAs, feel free. We actually have a great conversation with Erica, who is on our webinar here today. So with that out of the way, another question we hear. What about those who are offering a wellness HRA? Can you, again, common question, can you break down the difference between a wellness HRA and an LSA?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, you emphasized post-tax a minute ago, and that is one very obvious difference, right? So an HRA, wellness or other kind of HRA, is always pre-tax. And also they're subject to very strict regulations. They only allow certain expenses, and there's strict compliance requirements and things making sure that they're following for an HRA. With the LSA being post-tax, there's a lot more flexibility there. So when thinking about an HRA, a wellness, or other, there's very strict and ones that are allowed, right? So I think about like an integrated HRA, which is going to be the most common. So pairing an HRA with a group health plan. You could have a retiree HRA to help provide people money in retirement. You could have an individual coverage HRA or ICRA, which was new in 2020. Those are 3 examples, but of course there are others. But let's get it back to the wellness HRA, right? So a wellness HRA is going to be really a way to use an HRA that's oftentimes an integrated HRA. So you have to be enrolled in the group health plan to take advantage of that. And I've really thought about it in 2 different ways, right? So you could see some employers saying, I am going to provide HRA dollars for all 213D expenses based on my employees' completion of wellness activities like an annual screening or things like that. Or you could say, you could see some say, I'm going to provide dollars that are limited to be used with expenses that really qualify as more wellness related, but of course still have to fall into that 213D category. Maybe like smoking cessation, things like that could come to mind. So that's how I think about a wellness HRA versus an LSA, where again, post-tax, less regulatory requirement. We'll hit on some compliance stuff later and how that doesn't apply to an LSA. But that's generally how I think about HRAs versus LSAs, which is a super common question.
Yeah, thanks so much for summarizing that. It is a common question. And actually, Natalie is going to be our MVP of this, this webinar, because actually Natalie's going to go ahead and throw in, if you want to explore more differences between the LSAs and HRAs, when to use each. She's going to throw in a blog post that we have covering really the differences between the two and just kind of understanding the basics so you can kind of compare and contrast those two. So you can see she did that already. Thanks so much, Natalie. On our next slide, as I talked about this, we just don't want to be talking to you for the 45 minutes, hour we're together. We really want you to be thinking about and have this interactive. And so as you kind of see with maybe the guide that you downloaded, we want to take just a moment for you to take, to take a breath and say, what would the goals be, right? Like if you were like with any good thing before you jump into it, especially with benefits, if you're going to offer a benefit, what would your goal be? What gap are you looking to fill? Whether it be financial wellness, you can see some examples here, mental, emotional wellness, physical wellness, boost retention and attract new clients. I know everyone, new talent, I should say, everyone's dealing with that right now. So if you can, just take a quick breather. Think about if you were to add an LSA, what are some of the biggest things you'd be looking to achieve? So I want to pause just for 10, 15 seconds for you to jot that down and to think introspectively of what that might be. For those of you who maybe are brave and would like to kind of share what that might be, throw that in the chat. We'd love to hear maybe where you think an LSA might fit into your plan offering.
And I see one mention of employee retention and attracting talent. Absolutely spot on. And when we think about lifestyle accounts, you can almost step back and think about like your overall lifestyle offering, right? You probably have other benefits you consider as a lifestyle product. So oftentimes you want to think about how could my lifestyle spending account complement other lifestyle type benefits that you have today.
Oh, there's lots. Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of good ones flowing in now.
Mhm.
And a lot of this is probably some of the things we're hearing, maybe you're hearing directly from your employees too. Anything that catches your eye, Erica?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot around mental and emotional wellness, and therapy, things like that. Also inflation costs and just the rising cost of living. And those are things that we're seeing trending now as well. A lot of conversations around how can we support our employees with those true day-to-day cost of living expenses. And LSA is a great way to do that. And then of course, with mental health being at the forefront of our thoughts and our everyday living as well, being able to provide additional support to employees really around that emotional piece is key.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you to everyone for being willing to share a lot of common themes we're seeing here. And hopefully it helped just taking some time to make sure you would really address, what is the goal you're hoping to achieve with potentially leveraging an LSA. So let's go to the next slide. And I think one of the important things that we want to do is in this workshop is if you're having any kind of difficulties, right? Like I kind of just threw out there like, hey, what's your goal? We wanted to give you some considerations. And Jonas, maybe you can talk a little about, what are some of the things that you're hearing directly from employers, right? About why they're considering LSA. Is there any kind of tips that you would give with some of these considerations we're showing right now?
Yeah, for sure. And if I look at that top bullet there, that's really what I spoke to and kind of came to mind naturally as I was looking at the comments in the chat. In addition to that, stepping back and looking at your employee population, not only employees that you have today, but also employees you're looking to recruit for tomorrow. So what do those employees care about? There may be things that you want to add or remove from your eligible expense list based off of your audience. But then also thinking about what's the type of behavior that you want to influence your employees to do, right? So if you want to try to get them outside and go buy some park passes and go hiking, then I actually had an email in my inbox today about supporting park passes out in a specific state based off the employees there. So just a really relevant example from this morning. Then, I almost think about it like, how do you build a benefit that matches your values, your culture, your interests, your budget, and that of your employees and potential employees as well. So a lot of things to think about and a lot of value to be had from these benefits.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Jonas. I know there was conversation about, potentially adding something mid-year, which could be great as well. So we'll dive into them more later. I think if we go to the next slide, one of the $1 million question that you even kind of teased with talking about what you received this morning, Jonas, in your inbox is, what can participants use their LSA funds for? And I know that's a super loaded question because it's one of the beautiful things about LSAs is flexibility. But Erica, I'll let you try and cover if you can. I know we got a good visual here to support your answer.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things, and what we're finding is really employers looking for ways to somewhat narrow it down and offer a benefit that really is going to fit what they're looking to achieve, whether it's corporate initiative, feedback from their employees, and things like that. So, I mean, from a broad perspective, we channel them into 3 different categories of physical, financial, and emotional wellness. Everything from health club memberships, fitness equipment, even, outdoor activities such as golf and swimming lessons. Financial support, whether that be financial literacy classes or course material to help us as employees learn better how to manage our financials and really set ourselves up for long-term success. And then, of course, the emotional wellness, which could be meditation classes, non-medical therapy and counseling services, pet care, and things like that to help us support our day-to-day living. And some other things that we've been seeing trend lately, I know we just touched on this briefly, but expenses such as cost of living. So gas is on the rise. So being able to support employees with paying for that expense, cell phone bills, and really utility expenses that we have from managing a home or, where our living situation, childcare expenses above the standard pre-tax limits, and being able to support employees in that regard. We saw a big spike with that actually during COVID with our healthcare industry, because healthcare workers had to be there. They were on the forefront of taking care of everybody during the pandemic. And so being able to provide additional benefit to them to make sure that their family was well taken care of during that time. Uniform expenses. So if you have employees that are required to wear certain uniforms, being able to help supplement those expenses. That's also a very popular one in the healthcare industry with our nurses, and being able to help them cover those expenses, and also include really good footwear because they're on their feet all day. And one of the comments that I saw in the chat real quick was about building out this new employee experience, really surrounding well-being and how a lifestyle spending account would really fit that need. And I just wanted to call that out because I think it's a great idea to even title it employee experience, because it's so much more than just the traditional medical, dental, and vision benefits. We really have to consider the whole employee and their lifestyle and whatever their family dynamic might be, and be able to support them holistically across that whole life cycle of having an employee. So I think these are just another great way to be able to supplement and support that effort.
Yeah, I love that, Erica. Thanks. And thanks for covering all the options. I feel like there's a lot more there, but that's the beauty again of the LSA. I want to know, what have we seen? So maybe let's hit on some trends, right? What are we seeing with use today? Are we finding employees are using it at the beginning of the year as soon as they get it? Are they waiting? Are they doing small purchases, large purchases, using it all at once? I would just kind of love to hear, what's the interaction with these, Jonas?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. And so let's start out, what are the average contributions that we're seeing? So as of this year, 2022 plans, the average contribution we've seen is at around $750. That is removing some outliers. We have seen some clients offer larger amounts than that. I think I'm actually giving a preview to a later poll question, so I'll pause myself there. But if we look back to the prior year, where we can actually look at the consumer spend and the employer contributions, in 2021, the average contribution was $650. And then the average spend for everybody across the LSA plans that were enrolled was $470. So really looking at an average spend of 72% of that max for people who are enrolled, which to me is an extremely high engagement rate for the LSA. I'm really excited to look back in 2023 on 2022 plans to see how that has evolved. But that's the latest we have on that. If we also look at where are the dollars actually going, and we keep it kind of funneled within those 3 areas, we saw about 60% of dollars being used on physical wellness, 15% on financial and about 25% in that emotional and other. So a nice spread, but with physical, not surprisingly being the most commonly one used for a majority of the funds. In terms of when people are spending their dollars, that's really going to vary. There isn't a tried and true trend there, because I think about it this way, right? You might have somebody who goes out and buys a treadmill or a personal favorite, a Peloton, early in the year. They use up their funds, they file the claim, and they're done. Whereas you might have somebody who likes to go to the gym, be more social, get out, and spend $50 a month. And so it's really going to vary based off of the consumers' kind of interest and where they put those dollars. And we'll talk a little bit later about contribution frequency, which of course is going to impact when someone can or cannot spend.
Thanks so much, Jonas. I'm actually want to make a comment. I'm seeing tons of great comments as well as questions that are coming through. Just a reminder, if you can, be sure to put those questions. There is a Q&A feature as well in Zoom. If you put those questions in there, that'll help us keep track of them better, so that they don't get lost in the chat. And hopefully we'll have some time to address some of those at the end. So don't squelch the questions, just put them in the Q&A. That would be great. If we move to the next slide, and now that we've heard all these different examples, what I love to be able to do is just take a moment to think about, after hearing all these different types of examples, maybe what would be some interesting eligible expenses you'd be looking to have covered, either from your employer or to provide your employees, depending on your role. I think it's good for us to think creatively on that. And maybe Erica, while they do that, maybe you might want to give some hints on things to maybe expenses to avoid, or other tips that you've seen in terms of putting together eligible expenses.
Yeah, and that lines up really well with some of the questions that we're seeing come through on if it's covered under another pre-tax benefit, such as an FSA, HRA, HSA, can we also put it through an LSA? And so our biggest pro tip would be to avoid any medical expenses within the lifestyle spending account. Once you add in medical expenses, that does open you up to other regulations such as ERISA, needing to offer COBRA, and other HIPAA regulations. So that's one of our lines in the sand, I would say, is that we highly recommend to avoid putting any medical expenses through a lifestyle spending account. And the same could be said for other general expenses that could be through a pre-tax benefit, such as an FSA. So this is really to cover those expenses that fall outside of those traditional plan offerings.
That's great. Thank you. I'm seeing wonderful ideas coming through. Again, thank you so much for sharing those. And really good tip on to avoid the medical expenses. That's great too. Thank you. So thank you for taking time to creatively brainstorm what those might be for your employees. Well, guess what? It's time for another poll, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about money. What is the average contribution employers provide to their employees? If you were listening, you maybe might have caught this one in there, but this is a question we always get. Well, how much money should we be contributing or allowing them to spend? And so we can kind of give you at least the average sum that we're seeing with the plans that we're working with. So I'll give just a little bit of a moment or two to have that come on in. Oh, yes. Okay, good.
Yeah, spoiler alert, if you look 10 minutes ago.
That's okay. We're testing to see if they were listening. Where are we, Jonas? That's great. Okay, well, I think those are pouring in really good. We've only got one person that's chose $5,000. I'm sorry, you're incorrect. But the correct answer is, Jonas, go ahead and share them what the correct answer is.
Yeah, sounds good. So the correct answer is $750, which I alluded to earlier. I guess I'm not really sure how we could have talked about spend without tying it to contribution. So I'll take that one. And I did mention, we have seen some clients offer it higher. We considered doing a poll around what's the highest amount we've ever seen. And the highest that I've personally seen is $15,000 provided upfront on day one of the plan. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a one-time contribution for employment, that you got it up front, it rolls over year to year, and you can spend it down as you see fit. I've seen a couple in the $12,000 range, but we don't want to say those examples to scare people away, because they are total outliers. On average, removing those excess in a very positive way, it comes down to $750, which is a pretty reasonable amount, a little bit more than $50 a month, which aligns really well with your typical monthly expense for something like a gym membership.
Great. Thanks so much, Jonas. All right. So on the next slide, we want to know when, right? So we talked about how much, but it's also interesting to say, based on our client data, when do most employers contribute to the LSA? Erica, love your thoughts on this pie chart.
Yeah, so as you can see on the screen, the majority are offering it on day one. So giving the full annual eligible amount up front, let's say, for example, $500, and you would have access to that day one of the plan year. But the great thing about the lifestyle spending account is that you can break those up to fit however you would like those dollars to be allocated. So while day one of the plan is certainly the most popular, we also see that closely followed by monthly and then quarterly contributions as well. In the other category, I would say maybe a biannual contribution. So every 6 months, perhaps having that contribution made. And it really just goes back to what types of expenses would you like to allow through the LSA and what makes the most sense for the contribution schedule. For example, I think of a monthly contribution schedule pairs really well with a fitness reimbursement plan. So if you have monthly gym memberships, monthly online fitness subscriptions, those really align well as far as the timing of the money being available and then being able to request reimbursement.
Awesome. I love it. So again, like we've been doing with this, with the webinar here, is we want you to give the chance to think about, write down what you think your estimated budget might be. What could your contribution schedule look like? And remember, the guide that we provided for you is interactive. So you should follow that. And there's these tips to answer some of these questions as you kind of workshop out what an LSA might look like at your organization. Take just a moment or two to do that. Again, your total contribution and what you think your schedule might be. Jot some of those ideas down. Again, if you're feeling brave, feel free to put them into the chat, but for sure, jot them down for yourself and own reflection there. Great. Well, if you have a moment, just a quick moment to do that, I want to make sure we get all the great content we have covered today. So if we move along, we want to hit you with another poll because we have to talk about compliance. Yay! So we've got a quick poll. True or false? LSAs are subject to non-discrimination testing. True or false? Ooh, it's kind of a battle here. Well, I'm absolutely glad we are covering this because it seems we're pretty well split through our attendees. Like just another 5 seconds and we'll close that poll. Perfect. All right. So what's the answer, Jonas, Erica? Is it true or is it false?
LSAs are not subject to non-discrimination testing. They are post-tax. They're not subject to ERISA. They're not subject to COBRA. They're not subject to HIPAA. That's all under the assumption that medical expenses are not allowed in those plans. If they are included, then they do run the risk of being subject to all of those things. So we really lead with not allowing medical expenses in the LSA for those reasons. I did see a question I haven't answered yet, so I'm going to answer it live. What are the compliance requirements? We just hit on some of that. We also hit on the taxability of the LSA. So the taxability, we've already mentioned it's post-tax. So then you might have the question of, ultimately that's taxable income to the employee, right? You have your employer taxes that are due as well. And then we've also been asked the question around, and this is actually pretty frequently asked, but are the funds taxed on provision or are they taxed on use? I unfortunately can't give you formal guidance on that. I have to refer you to your payroll counsel or whoever to give you that answer. But I have had conversations internally at WEX with our payroll team. They were of the opinion it would be taxed on provision, but I've heard people with differing interpretations of it being taxed on use. So that's a little bit of the why I can't give you a clear answer on that. If we take a step back and we say, well, when are things taxed or not taxed for other benefits? Well, it's on provision, HSA contributions, medical deductions, things like that. So that would tie with kind of our internal dialogue. But again, due to the variance in guidance we've heard on that, would defer to employers to determine what they feel is appropriate based off of their expertise.
That's great. Erica, any other thoughts? Anything you've seen related to compliance at all?
Yeah, a couple things to add in, and it aligns with some of the questions that we see coming in too, would just be the varying contributions, not only in when they're being made, but how much is made to certain employees. I saw a question on, do they all have to be given the same amount? Our recommendation is that within each class of employee, based on your class definitions, that there is consistency with the contributions, but that you can make that have various contribution dollar amounts based on those different classifications of employees. So again, if you are having maybe part-timers and you want to give them a certain dollar amount towards certain expenses, that could be a different offering than you're giving your full-time population, as an example. Another one would be, could the contributions be based on meeting certain requirements? And absolutely. So that's something where maybe it's more wellness driven and you want to drive employees to get their biometric screening done. Once they've proven that they've achieved that, then they get a certain dollar amount towards those eligible expenses. So that's absolutely something that can be accommodated through a lifestyle spending account.
That's awesome. Thank you, Erica. I'm going to hit you with a follow-up question. I think as you move along is, we all know the design of a plan is extremely important, right? In terms of how it's going to be used. So I think when they're considering designing a plan or drafting an LSA plan design, what should they be considering to make sure the rollout is a successful one?
Right. So one of the main things that we always consider is what is that, how easy is it to access those dollars to spend or receive reimbursement? So that's one thing that we certainly want to alert our clients to consider as they're planning a lifestyle spending account and finding the right fit for that experience. Also, keep it simple. When we go back to the individual that made the comment on really building out this employee experience, you have to keep it simple. You have to make it easy to understand, easy to use, and broad reaching across your employee population. So that's why we get so excited about these LSAs, is because it achieves all of those things. A couple of other, fundamental things to consider is, would you like to require substantiation of those expenses and really hold employees accountable to a certain outcome? Then, that is something that you can consider as well. Is there anything else in your current benefit offering today that would align with an LSA, or where you could maybe make some adjustments to roll into that LSA? Plan design parameters such as, does the plan roll over? If unused dollars exist at the end of the plan year, how do you handle employees that separate employment mid-year and things like that? So those are all things that you can certainly work through the experts with on how to plan or design those plans.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Erica. And I see tons of great questions coming in. I want to make sure hopefully we'll get some time at the end to answer some of those. So keep them coming. Lots of great ones. I love the interest. So I want to move now to where the rubber meets the road, right? I'd love to hear us talk about some real life LSAs in the wild, right? This is a good question, right? Because sometimes it can seem almost overwhelming. Do we see most employers go with a boxed solution, right, of expenses? Or are we seeing them get really creative and customized? Love your thoughts there.
Yeah, we are seeing, up to this point, a majority of clients are utilizing more of a box solution where it incorporates the physical, emotional, and financial well-being mindset. Because again, it goes back to being able to meet employee need across a broad spectrum and not just having a very specific benefit offering that only is advantageous to a certain amount of people. Where we're seeing a shift to now, though, is that more creative line of thinking with covering cost of living expenses and being able to either expand the existing boxed offering that they have or roll out a new plan offering that really focuses on, we want to help our employees financially day to day with the cost of living and everything that is being thrown at us, either working from home, having higher expenses in our personal lives and our family lives and things like that.
That's great. Jonas, I want to hear success stories, man. Give me some examples of successful LSA plan designs for everyone.
Yeah, when I think about that, I think about kind of what goes into that, and some of it redundant to what Eric has shared. But I think about when you're working with an administrator for these, if they're leading with a standard eligible expense list, which is, we definitely recommend that, because then often employers are saying, okay, I'd love to offer an LSA, but where should I start? And leading with a standardized list is a place to start and customize from. has really been proven to be successful to give them a launching off point, but also because that eligible expense list is informed by that administrator, right? They've had the opportunity to talk with their claims folks, their operational folks. They've seen that expense list evolve over the years based off of what people have or have not offered, or what that company can or cannot support, right? So I definitely recommend starting off and see people be successful with evolving a standardized list provided by their administrator for all of those reasons I just mentioned. In addition to that, I mean, Eric already mentioned keeping it simple and consistent across employees, right? Giving all the employees dollars up front and allowing them to spend it how they see fit throughout the plan year is really easy. We could, people can easily systematically give it monthly, quarterly, things like that. But if people are incurring those wellness expenses, maybe it's just easier to give those contributions up front. I had an email this morning, same one I mentioned earlier, where an employer was thinking about breaking it up into 5 different LSAs based off of when dollars are available and where people live and eligible expenses. And what I said back is like, these are the things that can be supported, but I would ultimately question, like, why make it complicated, right? Why not just offer one expense, give people the contributions based off the schedule that you see fit, and then allow the expenses to be the same for everybody, right? That is easier to administer, it's easier to educate on, and it's easier for employers to manage with providing contributions, enrollments, and things like that. So that would be another example of kind of streamlining it, making it easy, which allows for more success. We also see some employers want to or not want to require substantiation for their expenses. Requiring substantiation ultimately allows or helps ensure funds are being used for the types of expenses that the employer is wanting to support. There is, of course, the argument to be made of, well, I want it to be easy for my consumers. I'm going to set a kind of a foundation for claims, but I don't want to have them, I don't want your team to look at the receipts and really validate them. Just let everything go through. You can do that as well, of course. Preventing medical expenses in that scenario is a little bit harder, but we do see people go that way. And then lastly, I would say, if you're looking to deviate from a standard expense list that's available, super common, which is obviously informing a lot of what we shared today, but collaborate with your administrator. It's important that you have that dialogue to not only make sure things are set up properly, but that they can actually talk with their teams to say, okay, this employer wants to offer this type of expense. Can we realistically support that? Are there any concerns? Can we get the documentation we need if documentation is required, and things like that? So those are probably some key things I think about when looking at who we've seen to be successful over the years.
So good. Thanks, Jonas. Well, there's always two sides of every coin and lessons learned, right, Erica? Is there anything recent that we've seen that employers should maybe stay clear of?
Yeah, where we would recommend staying clear of is the first come, first serve mentality, where you offer, maybe one large pool of funds to your employees for X amount of expenses. And whoever gets there first, great. And those that didn't have the opportunity to would miss out. So that's one thing where we really want to stay focused on meeting the whole employee and meeting their needs. So having contributions specific to each employee is really a recommended route that we would make for designing an LSA.
That's great. Good things to avoid. Thanks, Erica. So maybe as we start to wrap here, before we get to Q&A, do we have any tips on, right, like everything, you have to have a little marketing to drive adoption. How would you promote this benefit? Anything you've seen that's worked?
Yeah, first and foremost, employee feedback. I think we have a really good pulse on our employees most of the time, but even doing a specific survey to say what's missing or what else could we do as an employer to support you as our employee, and really take that consideration into play there. Having a good communication plan and educational materials is obviously a huge way to get this information out to employees, and make sure that they understand the benefit. Again, if we're keeping it simple plan design and simple access points for the employee, we also need to make sure that we communicate it out well so that employees engage in the program early and often and know the benefit that they're really receiving. So a good communication plan. Review your reporting as the employer and the plan sponsor to make sure it's performing to what you had hoped it would. And if there's any adjustments you need to make going into the next plan year, whether to plan design or how employees are accessing those funds, those are all things that we would recommend keeping an eye on throughout that plan year.
Awesome. Great way to wrap. It was so funny when we were putting this together. We're like, I wonder if anyone will have any questions. Well, we've got lots of great questions that I want to spend the rest of our time with, just starting to pepper to our experts, Erica and Jonas here. So I'm going to put them in the Q&A chat. We'll get to as many as we can. I grabbed a couple just from the chat before we made that announcement that I think we could cover here quick, and allow me just to read them verbatim, and I'll have you guys maybe address them best you can. The first one is, given that the FSA contributions are taxed, what would you say is the main value of offering an FSA versus just providing a monthly or quarterly allowance to use how an employee sees fit on their paycheck directly to their paycheck?
I can take that one.
I'll defer to you and Erica. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the benefits, if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, is giving the employer more control over how those dollars are spent. There's a lot of creativity in how you can design a lifestyle spending account. So not only are we adding additional financial benefit to our employees, but being able to keep it in a very specific and defined benefit that drives additional healthy behaviors, make sure that those funds are being used for the appropriate types of expenses, and really being able to add a different level of offering to your standard benefit package.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. Here's another one. You can set this up. Can you set this up where it's not front loaded, where they have to have the ER contribution built up before they can submit for reimbursement? Correct?
Yeah, we have, there's flexibility there. It's up to the employer, right? Do you want to provide on the first day of the plan year? Do you want to do it monthly, quarterly, or based off of if someone, completes certain types of things like biometric screenings? If you're tracking that, you have a platform to track that, you could then take that information and load a contribution to your administrator's platform. So lots of flexibility in terms of when dollars are provisioned.
Great. I'm going to keep peppering with questions here. Can you offer this to only benefits eligible employees, or do you have to offer it to all active employees?
So that's another choice that you as the plan sponsor can make, and who is eligible for this benefit. Because it is post-tax, it's not tied to any sort of health plan offering. You do have the option to offer it to non-benefit eligible employees as well. So again, that goes back to consistency within how you define your classes of employees, and how you would like to offer this benefit, whether to benefit eligible, part-time, full-time, those that are not benefit eligible and don't have access to the group health plan. That's the flexibility that you have with these LSAs.
Great. What about using the funds on family members? So for example, gym memberships for a child, ski passes for the entire family, etc.
Yeah, typically with that, we see the dollars intentionally used for the employee population and not dependents. But if that's a plan design an employer wanted to make, I don't see any issues with going that route.
Okay. And of course, I have to ask the big question, can you roll over the funds at the end of the year, or do they expire?
They can roll over.
Totally optional.
Yep.
Yep. The employer can choose that. A lot of times, we see them provisioned at the beginning of the year, so they're going to be use it or lose it, but some employers may choose to roll those over. So that is fully flexible.
Sure. This is a question more about using the funds. Does WEX offer a separate debit card for LSA, or is it the same benefits card they use for their health accounts? Does that get complicated?
Yeah, I'll take that one as well. So historically, I'm going to try to keep this short because we don't get too deep into our stuff. We'd love to talk with you offline, but historically, we haven't offered a debit card with our direct services for the lifestyle spending account. We are in active discussions and research around how to support that. So it can be done. We're planning to do it. There are things to be aware of when you do it, but if you're interested in that, I would love to have a conversation offline.
Great. Thanks, Jonas. Question about an eligible expense in terms of gas, travel from work, back to home, just vehicle expenses, anything outside the box?
Yeah, those are things that we're seeing trend now, especially gas and being able to cover that. But again, any vehicle related expenses, you could certainly add that in as well.
I think you covered this. Maybe just to confirm again the answer, can the contributions be given only when receipts are received based on the qualifying offerings?
Yeah, so we would, that is certainly something you could accommodate if you as the plan sponsor would like to require that substantiation is received and also adjudicated against the plan design, then the reimbursement would not be issued until that is completed.
Thanks, Erica. Lots of great ones here. I'm going to keep peppering through them. Do you see well-being vendors send points earned through well-being programs translate to LSA dollars? Any best practices you would recommend?
Yeah, what we've typically seen there, and Erica, add on anything I might miss. What we've typically seen there, it's definitely come up. Employers have those platforms. Oftentimes, the employer will monitor that, and then they can load contributions into the LSA administrator's platform based off of those. But typically, administrators are going to either allow employers to enter contributions online via file feeds, whether directly into the platform or through SFTP, et cetera. So multiple ways to get contributions into the platform, taking a look at data from other sources.
Thanks, Jonas. What has been common practice for companies taking advantage of this if an employee leaves and has not spent the money? Have they allowed them to take the money with them or not?
Typically, what we've seen in a common plan design is that no, they would not be allowed to take those dollars with them. Once they've separated employment, their access to that benefit would cease. And there's typically no run out period for a terminated employee to go in and access dollars for claims that were incurred prior to that date.
Thanks, Erica. Would you say that this type of benefit could replace existing employee paid benefits like pet insurance, FSA dependent care that are offered for these types of purposes? Or would the LSA be added in addition to those existing benefits?
Yeah, the way I'd think about that one would be of those other benefits, what might be a good fit for the LSA, and if it could be rolled up into the LSA, why not streamline it and keep it simple? Something like pet insurance could, of course, be a part of the LSA. Dependent care, so we have seen employers want to offer funds above and beyond what is allowed pre-tax through dependent care FSA. And so if an employer wanted to allow post-tax dependent care expenses to be allowed in the LSA, they could do that. We always kind of go back to that whole medical plan offering, right? So if there's other expenses or other benefits that are allowed pre-tax, take advantage of that. Don't merge that within the FSA, but those couple of examples are good candidates for that.
Great. Thanks, Jonas. I think we've got time for a couple more questions here before we wrap up. And thank you for all the wonderful questions. This is great. Speaking of questions, everyone loves a good integration question, but can WEX integrate with HRIS systems to capture new employees and auto fund accounts?
Yeah, definitely. Right. So when we think about this, it all comes down to how are contributions allocated? Are they systematically allocated and prorated based off of when somebody's enrolled, or are they, loaded ad hoc using something like a file to give them to consumers? So there's options there. And then, when you think about, enrollment platform integrations of getting demographic and enrollment data, it's really kind of the same concept across all benefits. Typically for administrators, it's just a different plan type. So yes, you can get integrations. You can automate the provision of funds based off when people get enrolled.
Thanks, Jonas. Can you provide this to employees outside of the United States?
So you can. One thing that we would just consider, and this is another great topic of conversation that we would love to have one-on-one. And I know we're going to put in a calendar schedule at the end of the webinar too, but you can. There's some things that we would need to consider based on funding mechanisms and reimbursement methods, but that's something that we would certainly talk to in greater detail.
Great, thank you. Can employees mix and match how they use their LSA funds throughout the year?
Yeah, yep. So it's all dependent upon what you as an employer decide to make eligible, right? So if there's emotional and financial and they have enough money to cover expenses they've incurred in both, it's totally up to them based off your plan design and what you allow to be reimbursed.
Great. I think there's time for two quick more questions. Does WEX offer services to administer, review, approve expenses based on parameters set by the employer?
We do, yes. As a claims administrator, that is one of the services that we do offer.
Awesome. And last but not least, at least for, for this webinar, can an LSA be edited at any point in the benefit plan year? Ooh, that's a great question to end on.
Yeah, there's total flexibility there if someone wants to add it mid-year or at the start to align with the other benefits plan years, for sure.
That's great. We cover so much of this stuff, so I'd really encourage you to subscribe to the WEX Benefits blog. We cover a lot of this stuff. And likewise, there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to. So as we wrap up, Erica mentioned it. We covered a lot today, right? Everything from expenses to contributions to key considerations on eligibility and a lot of customization options. And so you may be swimming with maybe more questions now than when you came in, but hopefully you feel like you've got a bit of a better grasp on it. And you've done a good job of starting your kind of workshop, your LSA plan design. If you are interested, the next step is, we'd love to talk about your specific organization and plan. So there's going to be a link. If you want to have more questions answered, if you want to have a conversation about what this might look like to set up, there is Natalie just put, again, Natalie, thank you so much. There is a Calendly link. If you want to talk to Erica, she's made herself available just to talk through any questions you might have and what a plan design might look like for you. So we really appreciate that. We wish you the best of luck with your LSA plan design. Please follow our podcast. Please follow our blog. And thank you so much for joining this LSA webinar today. WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.